Hello and welcome to LTC Heroes Live. I am at LeadingAge, Georgia 2022. This episode is sponsored by Experience Care and also by AG Roads. Today I'm really excited to be talking to Andy Landrum. He's Executive Director at Clairmont Oaks. Andy, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much.
Andy, before we went live, I was just asking you about your organization. You said something that was unique. I'm a talker. My wife says I speak too much. I've spoken to probably 500 executives, but very few have said that they focus exactly on what yours is in your area. What's your mission, and what does Clairmont look like?
Our mission, quite simply, is to create home for older adults. And we provide housing with services. And for me, it's about building community and creating home. So if we do that well, then we're living our mission.
Tell me how you got into this mission. Tell me your initiation story, and please go into as much detail as you feel comfortable. If you remember the day or the month, tell me how you got into long-term care.
Sure. Unofficially, I got into long-term care as a child. I grew up in church, and my folks would sing as nothing fancy or anything at all like that. But we would always go at least once a quarter to visit nursing homes and sing. As a child, nursing homes in the 70s were not great places necessarily. The smells were what they were, the sights were what they were, but my folks modeled care for older adults. I would go on to become a pastor. I would serve congregations for about 15 years. Predominantly, my congregants were older adults. When I was looking to do something a little bit different, I couldn't stray from older adults. So my first day was January 5th of 2009, and it felt very familiar from the first day.
I'm guessing that the learning curve moving from a pastor into long-term care is easier, shorter than the average, because a lot of times it's seniors who are reaching out to you at specific moments in their life, asking for forgiveness to family members, becoming a lot closer to God. But it wasn't exactly the same. What was your learning curve? Was it bureaucratic? Was it related to reimbursements? Was it related to surveys? How hard was it?
You've identified the challenges for sure. The compliance piece is always the compliance piece. And I laugh. I will go back periodically and read my notes from my first year in the industry. And one of my notes was, find a new job, because the compliance is such, it doesn't make me feel good. Let's just put it to you that way. But you don't accomplish the mission without the relationships with your compliance partners. And when that switch flipped, then it made perfect sense to me, and it's been easier from there.
You probably heard me say yesterday that LeadingAge Georgia specifically asked me to come talk about how the perception of long-term care needs to change. And one of the ways that I like to do that is hear it from the long-term care leaders like yourself. When you're looking for someone who hasn't been in our industry, maybe they're 17 years old, or maybe they're 29 years old, maybe they're single mom who's thinking about her second professional change. What attributes are you looking for in a frontline caregiver?
It always comes down to people. Do you have a genuine love for people? And is there room for grace in your world? And I believe if you can combine love and grace, then you have a temperament that will make you successful in what we do.
I really like that. My first interview this morning, Liz told me that grace would be the word she would put on a billboard. How long have you been able to express, manifest what you just said and what you're looking for? Is that something that you've kind of perfected in the last 5 years, or did you identify that as a young person?
I think that's been something that's been part of me for a long time. I'm not always great at articulating that in profound ways, whatever that means, but that's part of, I guess, my fabric of who I am.
So I think, and I'm going to put you on the spot, but also, for anyone in your team who's going to watch this, I don't have 30 minutes for you to name off 200 employees. When you think of that love and grace, is there someone in your team who maybe just picks up the trash, or somebody who serves the brownies and you're like, man, this person is an expression of what you're looking for?
Yeah. One of those employees is Maxine, and Maxine has the largest heart, the most accommodating person for others, regardless of who you are, what your background, what language you speak. It makes no difference. When you're speaking with her, you are the most important person on the planet. And Maxine embodies that as much as anyone, I think.
In my experience, pastors come in all sizes, shapes, colors. I'm interested in your leadership style. Are you the one who leads by voice, by action? Are you a person who leads by compliments? If it were up to your legacy, what are people going to say about you tomorrow if you go tonight?
I would hope that it would be, I practice a lot of management by walking around. Um, I feel like if I can sit knee to knee with someone, then we can talk through any problems that are coming up. We can hit all of the praises and the great things that we're doing. We can talk strategy and dream some. Um, so I suppose my leadership style would be hopefully one of inspiration as much as anything else.
Going back to your specific mission at Clairmont Oaks and the demographic that you work with, I'm interested in what lessons you've learned from them. And it might be either their demographic or it might be from long-term care. Have you changed as a person, as a pastor, I'm guessing as a family man, as a neighbor? What do you take home with you either from your work or from this industry?
Great question. It's a joy to have conversations with people, all of us, regardless of our age. And while I knew this while I was pastoring, it's certainly been something I see on a daily basis. All of us want to matter. All of us want to give. It doesn't matter if we have a lot of money or we don't, if we're young or we're not, if we are influential or we're not. We want our lives to matter. We want to be able to be invested in, and we want to invest in others. And I think those are always my takeaways with what we do.
I'm gonna move into some quotes that are important to me. I know quotes are important to you. I'm gonna and moving towards those, I'm gonna thank our sponsors today. We're sponsored by Experience Care and also by AG Roads. I'm guessing you know Deke Cato. I wouldn't be here if it weren't for him. So thank you, AG Roads and Experience Care, for making LTC Heroes community possible. Um, where I want to go with this, Andy, is some thought-provoking quotes. Let me move on down here, and I'm going to ask you, and I'm going to break up the order a little bit. I'm going to ask you one about, let's see, your team. It says, people may take a job for more money, but they often leave it for more recognition, by Dr. Bob Nelson. How do you go making sure that you're combating the staffing crisis through recognition? What are your shout outs? Are they you jumping in and helping somebody move someone? What does your recognition look like at your organization?
I think it's multifaceted. Certainly, one is none of us are too big to do anything. We all pitch in and do whatever is required. In the midst of the pandemic, as an example, one of our buildings lost power for 3 days. We had a storm come through. We were in a small pocket where there was no power, which meant that refrigerators were going and people couldn't cook, and we were scrambling to try to find food. And some of our great friends from LeadingAge, Georgia, were able to help us with that. So you just jump in and you do whatever has to be done. And that's me, along with our staff, delivering meals to folks. So you do whatever it takes. I like verbal affirmation. So I want to hear that I'm at, or I'm doing good, or whatever. And so I try to make sure that I do that. I know that others, it very simply, a T-shirt and a lunch is a great way to affirm.
I'm not sure if you heard me yesterday talk about my favorite book to give away is 5 Languages of Love. I'm also a person of words of affirmation. One of the things I've learned from long-term care are people who are good at acts of service, and long-term care makes me grow as a human being, specifically when I think about that book. I don't know about you.
Yeah, it's great. Been around a while and means a lot to so many of us.
So I think I'm going to take this quote out of context, but Groucho Marx isn't here to critique me. And he has a quote that says, "No man goes before his time unless the boss leaves early." You and I know there, and he's probably talking about people dying. I'm going to ask about one of your hardest days. People in long-term care don't go home early. Workers don't. They stay an hour over their shift, sometimes 12 hours over their shift. You and I have heard horror stories during COVID of 18, 24 hours, people sleeping. Can you tell me about one of the hardest days you've ever had? Feel free to share as many examples and details as you feel comfortable. And looking back on it, what have you learned from that hard day?
You hope all along the way that you instill within your team a buy-in to the mission and an attitude of you do whatever it takes. That was put to the test for us about 9 years ago. We had a fire in one of our smaller buildings in which the sprinkler system kicked in, and these events always happen on a Friday after 5 o'clock, and it always happens on the top floor if it's water, so that the majority of the building can experience that. There were 6 of us that came back in, and we left 8 the next morning after having cleaned up the things that we could, called in people to help do that, relocated 40 residents for the night into neighboring hotels, because you just do whatever it takes. That was a hard day, but looking back on it, that's our mission in a very real sense.
I'm going to ask you some rapid fire questions. I'm not going to start off with the easiest one because I've already had Mark Todd cheated and he was already prepared for one. So I'm going to try and throw you a different one, see if I can throw you off. Andy, what advice would you give to a smart, driven college student about to enter the real world? And then I'm going to ask you, advice would you give to someone who's thinking about getting into long-term care?
So entering the real world as a 21 or 22-year-old, know who you are. Most importantly, be comfortable in your own skin. There are lots of games to be played in the workforce and all of those things like that. There are politics and all of that. But if you're true to yourself, then you're going to be true to what speaks to you, and you'll be able to better invest in your work, in your community, etc.
I'm going to interrupt you before you answer the long-term care, because what you said there about getting comfortable in your own skin, it probably took me until I was 31 or 32. I don't know about you. Any advice to move that up so if your 24-year-old son or nephew comes to you and says, I don't want to wait until I'm 31 like Peter Murphy Lewis. Any advice?
I wish I had some great advice. I don't, because I was very similar in that maturation or lack thereof.
Yeah, I agree. So now 17-year-old comes to you, neighbor. Let's make this a mature junior boy who lives across the street from you, has heard about your mission, is interested, and says, I'm thinking about long-term care. What are you going to tell them?
I would tell him to do a couple of things. Learn as much as you can about a wide variety of subjects. Learn how to talk to people, but more importantly, learn how to listen to people, and be willing to ask people to share what's important to them, because that's when real communication happens between individuals, in my experience. So if you focus on broad-based education, learning how to speak to people, learning how to listen, I would start there.
Before we move to the last rapid fire question, and this is a tangent, what have you learned about yourself since COVID hit? Being the leader of an important organization, being the leader of a team and residents who've needed you more than any time in their life. What have you learned about either the way that you handle stress, or the way that you communicate, or the way that you survive?
How much time do we have?
I'll cancel the next 2 interviews if you got it.
See, there you go. What I've learned is, at more than any other time in my professional life and personal life, I can't do this by myself. I've always known I've had wonderful people in my life. I've been arrogant at times enough to where I've ignored them or not sought counsel and wisdom as much as I should have in the past. But in the last 2 years, I have just been reminded again. And that collaboration and that vulnerability proved to provide a spirit of authenticity, I believe, in all of our struggles through COVID, because we were struggling to figure out what to do like everyone else. And when you owned that you didn't have all of the answers and you were able to invite others around you to help in that process, still leadership is leadership and you have to make decisions. But that is probably as important a lesson as any I've learned.
I have one rapid fire question before we close up, and it is, if you could own one gigantic billboard out on the highway that millions of people are going to see for a couple of months, what are you going to put on it and why?
I had a professor long ago who said the world would be a better place if we understood what love in the form of a servant is about. So I think that catchphrase, love in the form of a servant, we talk about servant leadership a lot, but that idea of love and servanthood can change the world, can change our world in the few people that we interact with on a daily basis. And it's a little bit of Pollyanna in me. I would like to think it could change the world.
Andy, one of the mottos of LTC Heroes community is let's do care better, let's do care together, let's do it today. I think that's what energizes me about being at LeadingAge, Georgia, in the convention. Yesterday, I said, it's not about teamwork inside of our building. It's about there's a whole team of people here. Yesterday, I called my wife at 8:30 and I said, I think I'm gonna go to bed, but I'm just completely energized. I was surrounded by 100+ people yesterday who are smarter than me, that are more passionate than me. What energizes you about coming to this convention?
It's a great opportunity to see people again that we haven't been able to quite lay eyes on in person for the last couple of years. But there's always something that I learn. There's always something that there's a tweak of something new. There's a reminder of we're not always on all the time. Sometimes I need that extra boost and that reminder of the spark of why we do what we do. And I get that from my peers here.
Andy, thank you so much for joining LTC Heroes. I appreciate it. It was a pleasure to meet you. Thank you for sharing your wisdom and help change the perception of long-term care.
Thank you so much.